One thing I think we need to understand in a greater depth is how much we contribute to our own issue. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean that our issues are only governed by how we see them, or our issues are only our issues because we're a part of it. But to say that a lot of times when we're facing the issue, we're really only facing ourselves. We're really facing our relationship to whatever it is that's causing us trouble in a sense. And a lot of times it's not really the issue that's present, but what it represents. It's a representation of, I guess, sometimes our internal insecurities, or maybe our discontent with certain parts of ourselves that allow us to feel that discomfort with issue, that discomfort with challenge, that discomfort with whatever obstacle comes in our way. Because a lot of times obstacles aren't really obstacles as much as they are just reflections of who we are, and reflections of how we feel about certain things. And of course, when I say this, I don't necessarily mean big grand issues like what's happening around the world in regards to war and all that stuff, but in regards to things internally, the war we're at within ourselves. And it makes me understand to a greater extent why people say like obstacles are sometimes stepping stones. Because in a lot of ways, once we're able to overcome a problem or overcome ourselves in this sense, we gain greater understanding and greater purpose as it pertains to what it is that we want to do and how we want to traverse the world. And once we get to that step, I feel like it's about continuing to take those steps and understanding that sometimes our confrontation and sometimes things in our life are really supposed to just be taken as challenges, or taken as, more reasons to affirm who you are and give yourself affirmation. And even in my own experience, because not really recently, but in the past, whenever a problem or a challenge or something came in my way, I really tried my best intently to take whatever it is I was trying to shake me off my ground or shake me off of, the person I am, as a challenge to instantiate myself with greater depth and greater intensity into the world. And I don't say that to say that whenever you confront a problem, buck up, get really solid, but allow yourself to confront the problem by seeing what's there. And I feel like a lot of times we're clouded by our perception of ourselves, or our perception of how that problem is going to impact us, or the consequences, this, that, and the other, to the point where we're unable to truly address what's in front of us. We can't heal what we don't acknowledge. And a lot of times we don't acknowledge the problem so much as we acknowledge the implications of an issue. Like if something goes wrong, I'm like, or I don't even know. If I was to fail at something, instead of taking that failure as something personal, like, oh, I failed, like this is going to happen because of this, when we really should be invested on what we can do, what's left for us to influence, what's left for us to capitalize off of. Because I feel like in focusing on that negativity, or in focusing on things that are outside of our control, we lose control of ourselves. Because we're vesting so much of our value, so much of our attention and our energy into things that we have no real control over. And in that way, we're taking part of that onto ourselves by giving our energy and placing ourselves within something we can't control. And that's why I feel like it's important, not necessarily to only focus on the good things or only focus on things you can do. I feel like it's important to acknowledge your shortcomings, acknowledge things that you can do to improve, and acknowledge the parts of yourself that seek out change. But I think it's crucially important to sort of live in your positivity rather than to live in that negative reality of your lack of control. Because I feel like control is something you give to yourself, or in regards to you. You can't control the outside world, and what's not in your hands shouldn't be in your mind. You can allow things to sort of be thoughts and have caution about the world, and I think that's important. But I think you're supposed to live in the world. You're supposed to not necessarily allow your mind's bias to dictate exactly how you feel about every single circumstance and every single thing. Because a lot of times I feel like we feel negative about things because of how we relate to them. And how we relate to these things is really governed by how our mind has attached parts of ourselves and parts of our value onto certain circumstances. And what I realize is our value is truly in our perspective. And I mean that in two ways. Like, I feel like a person's value is defined by their perspective. I feel like if you have a good perspective of the world, you will achieve good things, because you're allowing yourself to capitalize off of good opportunities and seeing the world in a way that's constantly progressing towards a benefit for you. And in that way, you are benefiting yourself. And in the same light, your value being in your perspective is also saying that how you view yourself is your value, is how you're going to be valued. Because if you think you're terrible, you're going to act in accordance to that terribleness, in accordance to that negativity. And that's why I feel like the importance should always be placed on validating yourself and giving yourself that affirmation rather than your path. Because in focusing on the path, all we're going to see is obstacles. But if we focus on affirming ourselves, then we're going to be able to overcome those obstacles, because it's never really been about the obstacle, but been about affirmation of who we are and allowing ourselves to walk that path just by affirming ourselves. And that's not to say, all you have to do is sit there and tell yourself you love yourself. Of course, there's an action aspect to it. I feel like doing your best isn't sitting still, and a lot of things aren't sitting still. It's about placing effort and placing your awareness into that which you want, to the point where it's expressed into the world. Sometimes I feel like we wait on the world to show us reasons to like this, to love ourselves, to feel valid, to feel, I guess, certain in our desires. But I think that's because we expect that certain thing. And I feel like we have to learn to sort of desire without expectation to a good extent. I'm not saying that if you apply yourself to something, you shouldn't want to get a good something. But you don't necessarily need to have that expectation. And I know that's sort of like a double-edged sword. Like, why would you not expect something if you put your work into it? But I realize we don't harvest the day we reap all the time, and the world always gives you what you need and not necessarily what you want. And it's important to sort of accept things as they are so you can move forward. Because things aren't always going to be exemplary of how you want the world to be, but more so how you are. And if you are someone who's having these grand expectations for, I guess, how this is supposed to go, how this is supposed to go, how this is supposed to go, that's not to say that it'll change it, but to say that if something does go wrong, that energy and that self that you've invested in your expectation will come back to bite you. Because if you expect something to go a certain way and it doesn't, that's where you're left out of line. Because your energy is out of line with whatever you expected it to be. And then in reality, you're invested in something that's not current. And because you haven't accepted things for what they are, you can't accept your current place within that situation. And that's why I feel like it's about overcoming yourself more than it is about overcoming an issue. Because it's always you who has to carry out the actions that confront an issue. It's not just the issue by itself. It's how you confront it and how you allow yourself to open, I guess, your mind to the possibilities or different ways and avenues to, come in contact with it. Because like I always relate it back to school. I try to find better analogies, but that's what I'm doing right now. If I fail a test, instead of focusing on like telling myself, oh, I failed, or I'm doing this, I look at what I did wrong. I understand what my study habits, this is that and the other, and I devise a new way to go forward. In focusing on that constant what we lack, we lose everything we stand to gain. And I feel like you have to take those sort of failures as learning opportunities, because you lose nothing in trying but gain everything in success. And that failure, you might fail a grand one. But all in all, your life continues. And it's important to not vest all your value in what it is that you do, but who you are. And secure it with what you do. And if something's out of your control, if you really tried your best on an exam or something like that, then you have to give yourself grace. You have to understand that things don't always have to go in a successful way. Doing your best doesn't always mean you're going to succeed. And I don't say that to discourage anyone. Of course you should try to succeed. Of course you should want that success. But the expectation of that success, I feel like, often takes away from our true desire. Because I feel like it's not really that success that you want, it's how it makes you feel. And if you can validate your feelings and validate how you feel prior to whatever it is that you receive, then you'll be unaffected by how it goes. And that's not to say you won't be motivated to do it, but to say that you will desire that without expectation. And in that way, you're free from whatever it is that's surrounding it. Like, I've taken a couple exams, a couple midterms, and I truly tried my best on them. And after the exam, I'm not really anxious about how it's going to go. I mean, it's going to go how it is. I put myself out onto the paper. I put myself out onto whatever I can. And, in relating it to school, I realize I'm very privileged to have that be one of my main things that I have to confront. But when it comes to ourselves, I feel like it sort of is portrayed in the same light. It's about how much faith and self you give to yourself, and how much, I guess, how much you validate your own efforts. And sometimes your validation of your effort isn't just like saying, "Oh, I did it. I worked really hard," but the very action of working hard is validating your own effort. Realizing that the work you put in can influence whatever it is that you're trying to do. And in my experience, that's all that it's ever been. Doing my best and trying to keep moving forward. Because you can't leave anything behind if you don't move forward. And I think a lot of us are trying to leave a bunch of stuff behind, but we can't do so because we're constantly caught up in how we relate to the past, or how we relate to the situation, and what this means about us, and what this tells us about how we should feel about this, that, and the other. When we really should just be worried about how we feel about ourselves. Because it's always that relationship to the situation, that relationship to the issue that becomes prominent when the issue arises. The issue by itself is just there. You can have as much care and empathy for it as you want. Like if your friend had that issue, would you be feeling super negative about it? Would you be stressing yourself out over it? I mean, to an extent, maybe if you're very empathic for them and this is another. But as it pertains to ourselves, we have to realize that we are also separate from these situations. We have a relationship to them, but they aren't us. They don't define who we are. They don't define how we should go about in the world. They just define a single expression. And sometimes you have to learn how to express yourself in a certain way. Like if I want to be a great public speaker and I go on stage and I don't really speak, of course there's a certain expression. Of course there's a way to do it in a proper way. And of course I would have to practice that if I couldn't do it. And what I mean to say is, a lot of times you have to realize what you have to do in order to confront the issue. And that doesn't take just seeing the issue, but seeing yourself within it. Understanding your actions and understanding your implications and your, I guess, responsibility in attacking this problem, in, I guess, overcoming it. Because once you overcome yourself within this situation, then it's no longer about how it makes you feel, but more so what you can do to fix the issue rather than to fix your feeling. I feel like a lot of stuff is done for how we feel. And I think in doing that, we lose sort of sight of how we can actually attack the issue. You can't heal what you don't acknowledge. And I feel like a lot of times the negativity placed within our life is placed by us. Of course, there's negativity within the world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, we have to take that on to ourselves. It's important to realize what's coming from what's pulling your strings, and making sure you're one of the things that is pulling your strings. Because once you get to that point, I guess, of pulling your own strings and then giving yourself that grace, then you realize what you can do. And it takes presence to do all of that. I feel like you really have to be present with yourself in order to understand what you need to do in certain situations. Because certain things aren't going to be just painted out in front of you. But what I've realized, because there's been a bunch of stuff thrown on my plate recently, and instead of like trying to connotate it before I even get to doing it, I just try to do it. Like I'll type in something, I'll try to look it up, how to do this, how to do that, and try to understand it by actually doing it, rather than trying to understand how to do something without conscious effort in doing it. It's like we're trying to figure out how to solve a Rubik's Cube without touching a Rubik's Cube at all. You actually have to put that sort of effort in to figuring out, and not connotating it negatively before you even get to experience it. He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it's necessary. And sometimes we don't have to suffer at all in regards to our trying to do something, or our attempts to do this, is that, and the other. Because I find that when you're present enough to actually try and give your best effort, things are accomplished a lot more quickly. And I feel like it's our thought that takes away from our ability to truly capitalize off of our opportunities. Like when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, dang, what should I do? And I spend more time thinking about what I should do than just figuring out one thing to do and moving forward with that. It's about that presence and that conscious intention towards your goals and towards what it is that you need to accomplish during a given day or during a given whatever period of life you're at. And that's what I mean by overcoming yourself instead of overcoming the problem, because our problems are really just problems, and you are the thing that has the grander definition. So I think if you figure out more of what you are, then you realize how insignificant a lot of the things we worry about are too. All that to say, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. Make sure you're doing what you can with what you have. Make sure you're not treating yourself like you're a problem as well. The less we think we're the cure, the more we're going to feel sick. But of course, be honest with yourself. Realize if you're drinking the poison that's making you sick. And I think that also takes presence. Just being present enough to see what is taken away from you and what, I guess your role in that taking away is. And if it has nothing to do with you, then that's not for you. You feel me? I feel like that's sort of beyond what we should allow ourselves to be worried about. If it's not in your hands, it shouldn't be in your mind. But do what you can with what you have, truly. Try to take care of your mental and treat yourself like a friend to the best of your ability. As long as you have yourself, you have somebody, and I think it's important to realize that even at the darkest of times. So, thank you.